As we always do at the conclusion of a series, I leave it up to you as far as who should be nominated and ultimately voted into this channel's Hall of Fame, where we are able to go back and look at the names of the players that made a series what it was. Whether you go all the way back to the Vancouver series with the likes of Essa Hall, you have Carey Price in this channel's Hall of Fame, numerous, countless others, Frederick McDonough, so many legendary names in the history of this channel, because let's be honest, we've been doing this for quite a while at this point. And now is the time to revisit this channel's Hall of Fame, because we are moving on. Now, I've talked about it a lot. This year has been very interesting for me and for this channel because plans have changed consistently. When you talk about the undrafted free agent only challenge, which blew up in my face because, simply put, there aren't that many good players who sneak through the draft anymore, unlike prior years. When you talk about the constant evolution of a series like this, Mike Milbury mode with the Chicago Blackhawks. But at the end of the day, despite all of that, constant change, I'd say a decent amount of it was probably for the better, all things considered. I mean, the undrafted challenge, it just wasn't the right time. With this, I think it's a good thing in case we ever do a Milbury mode challenge again. We will be able to say, okay, this worked, this didn't. Here are the more defined rules on how to make it work. So I do view these two series in particular as a success, as we had a very interesting, kind of newer idea that I've run before, but, we were willing to adjust the rules on the fly with Milbury mode. And the more rules-heavy King series, which I'm also very happy with ultimately, because with these series, both of them left people in the comments saying, hey, another season wouldn't hurt. And that's how I know the people enjoyed the series at the very least. More so than, oh, hey, the views started to drop or whatever. It's, hey, do I know the people still enjoyed the series? And for the people that leave the comments saying, hey, people who leave comments in general, first and foremost, thank you for interacting. Of course, with the video and with the channel, it helps me out a lot, actually, as well as, of course, leaving the likes. But channel interaction does help quite a bit. But, being able to see those comments let me know that, okay, people did enjoy these series. And it's not just like, hey, when are you starting the new ones? But ultimately today, this video is about looking at the group of players, the group of individuals that helped make the Chicago series what it was, the LA series what it was, and unlike my normal course of action, I am going to be letting you guys know in this video, you would have seen it in the title, what these new series are going to be. Before we get to that, let's talk about the Chicago series and the 4 individuals who have been nominated for Hall of Fame status. Of course, you'll be able to find the polls in the description. First and foremost, it's a player that we cannot talk about because he retired. But of course, you know the name, you know the face, you know the stat line. It's Patrick Kane. And it's completely unsurprising that Patrick Kane was nominated when you're talking about a series with the Chicago Blackhawks. How could it possibly be surprising? And of course, he didn't slow down at all. We stayed loyal to him, and he was fantastic in kind. So Patrick Kane absolutely deserves his spot. Of course, we stayed loyal to Kane and Taves for as long as we possibly could. The second player, I mean, you knew it was coming. We acquired Ned Eakin in one of the most one-sided, illogical AI trades I've ever seen in my life. Montreal, you did us the biggest favor in the world because Ned Eakin is the type of player that has you say, another couple seasons to see what this guy's going to be. A simply fantastic player is the only way to put it. A playoff performer as well, over a point per game in the postseason. In his 5 trips to the playoffs as a member of the Blackhawks. He is one of the best pure goal scorers we've ever had, one of the best pure point producers that we ever had, and absolutely deserving of the nomination for potentially being put into this channel's Hall of Fame. Now, I mentioned Ned Eakin being one of those players that makes you say, boy, I wish there was another season or two. Gabriel, don't call me Glenn Metropolita, is absolutely one of those players. The overall, the potential, the numbers, nearly being a point per game in his career, it speaks for itself as well in terms of what this kid is, what he could be. And I mean, you think about that. He's old school, puts up a ton of points, takes a ton of penalties. I don't know who to compare him to, but he is an absolute beast on the ice, and I am going to kind of be sad that we don't get to see what he is going to be, what Ned Eakin will continue to be. But as I mentioned, when you think about memorable names from this series, I think Ned Eakin and Gabriel Metropolita for the computer-generated players are towards the top of the list, if not at the very top. That said, we have one more individual. And notice I've used the word individual. And that is because for the first time, it is not a player being nominated. It is a general manager. Mike Milbury receives the nod. And it's tough to say that by the Hall of Fame's definition of people who you're going to remember a series for, that he is not a Hall of Famer because this series was based off of him. Like his trades, the lack of trades, the signings, whatnot. It's tough to say that Mike Milbury himself does not deserve to be a Channel Hall of Famer for his efforts in this series. So those are the four: Patrick Kane, Ned Eakin, Gabriel Metropolita, and Mike Milbury. If there's someone who you think was snubbed, let me know. And of course, we can give some honorable mentions, but I left it up to you guys in the last episode of the Hawks series, who deserved that shout out. And ultimately, those were the four that were heavily mentioned. So with that, we'll bring things over to the King series. However, before we do that, we have two new series coming up. And like I said, normally I just drop them. And it's like, here you go. Here are the new series. But I do want to tease you guys a little bit. The first series that we're going to talk about here, I am asked a ton. Are you going to go back and use teams that you've used before? We want another Boston series. We want another Vancouver series. We want another rebuilding hockey town. Well, I am happy to say that we are going back to a team that we've used before. And I'll tell you why. Because a few years ago, we had a series with the Seattle Sea Cattle where we used WHL players, but only from the four Washington state-based teams. That being, of course, the Spokane Chiefs, the Seattle Thunderbirds, the Everett Silvertips, and the Tri-City Americans. Draft to glory style, no trades, no signings. We could only pick up players from those four teams, and it was as difficult as you may have expected. That said, this time, it's not a return to Seattle. But what it is a return to that idea, that concept. But this time, we're going to the OHL. And this time, we are going to be using the three U.S.-based teams in the OHL. That being, of course, the Saginaw Spirit, the lovely Erie Otters, and, of course, your favorite and mine, the Flint Firebirds. Now, if you look at a map of where these two teams are located, Flint Firebirds, Saginaw Spirit, based in the lovely state of Michigan, and right on the other side of the old Great Lakes there, in lovely Erie, Pennsylvania, you have the Erie Otters. What team is extremely close to those three OHL teams? Why? That would be the Detroit Red Wings. We are returning to Hockey Town, this time with one of our greatest challenges to date, Draft to Glory OHL edition, with just those three U.S.-based teams, the Detroit Red Wings being the host You wanted me to go back to Hockeytown? Well, it's not exactly in the same style as the original rebuilding Hockeytown was, but it is a new challenge. Very difficult challenge, nonetheless. With that said, we turn our attention over to the Los Angeles Kings, who ended this series in a very disheartening way after getting swept by the St. Louis Blues. And I've mentioned it a lot, but there are quite a few moments that, are episodes that end with the comment section saying, don't stop just yet, one more season, see what happens. And I totally get that. This series, of course, highlighted by the fact that it was a very rule-heavy series yet again, which I do like. I like the challenge of having to put more thought into building a team. And obviously, the big story here, I would say, is goaltending. I mean, we had Carter Hart. We did win a cup with him, but he wasn't between the pipes. Yuri Glebov comes back, and he shit the bed in the playoffs. No doubt about that. But the team we were able to build, the combination of some younger stars with players that we inherited by them being on this squad to begin with. Very interesting to see how it all played out. And of course, in talking about this series, Anisimov, Drury, Mercier, we did leave this organization in a pretty good spot, even if you want to talk about Genther, Turcotte, and Grundstrom being incredibly expensive. Or Grundstrom, not so much. I'm just talking about Savoy mainly. And then, of course, you have Grundstrom and Kapri, who are on fantastic deals. Jared Anderson-Dolan as well. Manny Avani, what a pickup he is, and what a pickup he could continue to be. Just constantly keeping a really good structure to this team, all things considered. And because of that, we have quite a few Hall of Fame nominations. And we're going to kick things off with one of the players that people said I made a big mistake in not getting rid of. And now, Carl Grundstrom is up for nomination for the Channel Hall of Fame, and I think rightfully so. He was fantastic for us. That contract looked rough at a time. It might have even had to have been his last season here, but what a player Carl Grundstrom was throughout this series. Multiple over a point per game seasons, including at least being a point per game in his last 5 seasons, a 100-point year in between. He was absolutely tremendous, and there are only so many superlatives you can add that really fit the bill. You look at what he did in the playoffs when we won the Cup. I mean, he's a point-per-game player in the postseason. That speaks volumes to how crucial Carl Grundstrom was to our success in this series. That said, nomination number 2, one of those younger players that you wish you could see more of, but unfortunately the series has to end at some point. It's Rick Van Katteschen. Very interesting player. I mean, only 4 seasons on the team, but this season, his real breakout year. But you talk about him stepping into a role where we had to get rid of some people. And all in all, playoff performer as well. 37 points in 48 games. Incredibly happy with the career that Rick Van Katteschen had and where he could continue to go for the former first-round pick, the unbelievable physical edge that he played with. Very solid player. In terms of a contract, likely would have been leaving the team, though. I mean, no doubt we would have qualified him. He's not worth that much. So it was the reason why I knew this St. Louis series. It's like, okay, once that was over, it was our last run. Grundstrom was likely going to have to go. Van Katteschen definitely would have been leaving. The team was just going to change a little bit too much. Speaking of change, that brings us to player number 3, who unfortunately had to depart this team. You hate to see it. It needed to be done. But what a crucial part to the success Kale Clague was to the Los Angeles Kings. He ends up in Philadelphia. But obviously, again, a tremendous defenseman for us. Never the biggest point getter in the world, but the plus-minus really speaks volume, to how well we did when he was on the ice. The first 2 seasons, I mean, it took him a little bit to get going, but he was a stable force, an easy nomination for potentially being a captain on this team. Just a phenomenal defenseman for us, all things considered. Maybe not upper echelon, but you know what? Sometimes for channel favorites, it's not always about who had the best stat line. It's about who was the heart and soul of the team. And it's tough to say that Kale Clague really wasn't a big part of the heart and soul of this team. Next up, Matthew Savoy. 24 years old at this point, former 3rd overall pick. Again, you want to talk about heart and soul. 471 points in 408 career games. A stunning player offensively. Huge playoff point producer as well. 65 points in 54 games. The numbers really do speak for itself, despite the fact that, yeah, that's a hefty contract, and you could argue we perhaps should have lost him. Option number 5, Rasmus Kapri, along with Carl Grundstrom. Somebody that at one time, the majority thought, let's move on from this guy. It's a good thing we didn't. Because what a player he turned into as well. A career-high 105-point season this past year. A big-time playoff performer as well. It's tough to argue against Rasmus Kapri. Not the biggest name in the world. He's not an Alex Turcotte, but still an absolutely incredible option that we had on this team. Next option. Next nominee. I don't think I have seen a comment section so distraught as to when I had to trade or actually let go of Tyler Madden because of the contract. Tyler Madden, and maybe it's because we have a lot of Canucks fans that watch this channel, but man, do people love Tyler Madden, and justifiably so. The best third liner you could possibly hope for, a big-time playoff performer. Does he deserve the Channel Hall of Fame? I mean, maybe off of that postseason run alone, maybe he does. But I do know, in terms of who I expect to make it, it's probably him. Because the support shown for Tyler Madden was top-notch. We have 3 players left. And the first one is the only goalie of this series. Brandon Kalanos was given a nomination. Now, I don't expect him to make it. He spent under 2.5 seasons here. He wasn't fantastic in the regular season, but what people are going to remember him for is this right here, where he stepped in for an injured Carter Hart and helped win us a Stanley Cup. Is one postseason worth of heroics, where one could argue he was carried to the cup, worth putting him into the Hall of Fame for? I'm not entirely sure. But it certainly was a beyond memorable moment as he helped to lead us to our only Stanley Cup in this series' history. Next up, we can't look at him, but I'll just say, oh captain, my captain. It's Anze Kopitar, who stayed a king for the entire duration of this series, and god damn it, he won a Stanley Cup and was crucial in doing so towards the end of helping us get over the line. Anze Kopitar is a nominee. Which means either Dylan Guenther or Alex Turcotte were not nominated. Along with the likes of Jared Anderson-Dolan, Vince Dunn wasn't nominated, Tobias Bjornfot. There are certainly some options, even someone like Marcus Phillips, Mo Marsh, but there are certainly some options that people could say were complete snubs. But it comes down to Dylan Guenther or Alex Turcotte, and you get a look at Dylan Guenther's numbers. 462 points in 400 games. 395-plus point seasons. A tremendous player. 28 points in 21 games. But Dylan Guenther was not nominated for the Channel Hall of Fame. Alex Turcotte was. And what might be a controversial move, but Alex Turcotte, 700 points in 649 career games. An absolute monster. Led the way in the cup-winning year. It's tough to say that Alex Turcotte doesn't deserve it. He does. But it is a bit surprising to see that Dylan Guenther did not. So again, your nominees for the King Series: Grundstrom, Van Kadishin, Clague, Savoy, Kapri, Madden, Kalanos, Kopitar, and Turcotte. Feel free to let me know which team or which player from either of these two teams was snubbed and did not get the attention that they deserved. With that, the second new series that will be starting up. Call it a hunch. I think you guys are going to like it.